What would you do if the thing everyone told you to throw away turned out to be worth more than everything they kept? The morning of Eleanor Hartwell's funeral, her granddaughter Ivy Hartwell, 29 years old and 3 months behind on rent, carried a garbage bag of borrowed black clothes up 4 flights of stairs to a bathroom the size of a coat closet and tried to make herself look like someone who belonged in a room full of lawyers. She didn't. The Hartwell family estate was a 2-story Victorian on the edge of Oakville, Ontario, the kind of house that had always smelled like furniture polish and old money and a particular kind of silence that made you feel like you were tracking mud on something important. Ivy had grown up visiting that house every Sunday until she was 12, until her mother remarried and moved them to Thunder Bay, and Sunday dinners became Christmas cards that stopped coming by the time she was 15. She hadn't spoken to her grandmother Eleanor in 17 years, and yet here she was. The letter had arrived at her apartment 3 weeks before Eleanor died. Handwritten on cream stationery, the kind you had to order specially, not buy at Shoppers Drug Mart. Eleanor's handwriting was still elegant despite her age, each letter formed with the careful deliberateness of a woman who had been taught that carelessness in small things revealed carelessness in character. "I know I have no right to ask you to come," the letter said, "but I am asking anyway. There are things that need to be said before they can no longer be said." Ivy had almost thrown it away. She'd held it over the recycling bin in her kitchen for a full minute before setting it down on the counter and making a cup of tea she didn't drink. She went. Of course she went. Eleanor died 11 days after Ivy arrived in Oakville. They had 11 days of stilted conversation that slowly became real conversation. 11 days of Eleanor teaching Ivy how to make butter tarts the way her own mother had taught her, with the filling still a little runny in the center, the way God intended. 11 days of Eleanor saying things with her eyes that she hadn't figured out how to say with her mouth yet. On the 9th day, Eleanor had taken Ivy's hand across the kitchen table and said simply, "I'm sorry I let them pull me away from you." Ivy had said, "It's okay." It wasn't entirely okay, but it was enough. She had not met the rest of the family until the morning of the reading of the will, in the offices of a law firm on Lakeshore Road, whose waiting room had leather chairs and a coffee table with architectural magazines that no one ever actually read. Her uncle Spencer Hartwell, Eleanor's only son, 58 years old, silver-haired and wearing a blazer that probably cost more than Ivy's monthly take-home pay, looked at her the way you look at something you'd hoped wouldn't show up. His wife Diane sat beside him with her ankles crossed and her expression arranged into something that was technically neutral but communicated everything. Their daughter, Melissa, 26, spent the first 10 minutes examining her nails. Spencer had been managing the family's assets for years. He had also, Ivy gathered from the few things Eleanor had said in those 11 days, been managing his own expectations about what would eventually come to him. The lawyer's name was Gordon Whitfield. He was efficient and not unkind, and he read through the will in the measured tone of a man who had delivered difficult news enough times to have learned that the best thing to do was get through it cleanly. To Spencer and his family, the house, the investment accounts, the cars, the furniture, the art on the walls. It was a considerable inheritance. Melissa stopped examining her nails. To Ivy, "My late husband's watch, as described in the attached letter, along with the contents of the wooden box stored in the lower cabinet of my bedroom wardrobe. She will know what to do with it." There was a beat of silence. Then Spencer said, "That's it." Gordon Whitfield said that was it. Spencer turned and looked at Ivy with an expression she recognized. It was the look people give you when they've already decided you're a charity case and they're trying to figure out if they should feel guilty about it or annoyed. He decided on a kind of magnanimous pity that was somehow worse than contempt. "There's a watch and some old box," he said. "I think Mum kept her sewing things in it, or old letters or something." He shrugged. "I suppose you're welcome to it," Melissa said, not quite under her breath. A long-lost granddaughter shows up out of nowhere and walks away with Grandma's thread and needles. can't make this up." Ivy didn't say anything. She went back to the house with Gordon Whitfield to collect what Eleanor had left her. The lower cabinet of the wardrobe was at the back of Eleanor's bedroom, which still smelled like her. A particular combination of lavender and something warmer underneath, cedar maybe, or old wood. The cabinet door stuck a little when you tried to open it. Inside was the watch, tucked in a small velvet pouch with a handwritten label in Eleanor's writing. Thomas's, 1962. Wears well. And beside it, a wooden box. It was not what Ivy had expected. She had pictured something ornate, or at least something that looked like it might matter. What she found was the opposite. A plain wooden crate, roughly the size of a shoebox but heavier, with a hinged lid and a simple latch. The wood was dark with age and had the slightly sticky feel of something that had been stored in a warm, closed space for a long time. There was a smell to it she couldn't name. Dusty, faintly sweet, like dried flowers and something older underneath. There was a note taped to the lid. "Ivy, this was given to me by my mother, who received it from hers. I was told it was worthless, and I believed that for a long time. I kept it anyway because I couldn't bring myself to let go of it. I think you understand that feeling better than most. Don't let anyone tell you what something is worth before you've found out for yourself." Ivy sat on the edge of Eleanor's bed and read the note twice. Then she put the note carefully in her coat pocket, picked up the box, and carried it to her rental car. It was heavier than it looked. She'd guess maybe 8 or 9 kilograms. Whatever was inside shifted slightly when she tilted it. A faint, solid movement, like something dense settling. She drove back to the small room she was renting above a Thai restaurant on Kerr Street and set the box on the kitchen table and made tea and sat across from it for a long time before she opened it. The latch was stiff. She had to use a butter knife to coax it open. Inside, wrapped carefully in what must have once been white cloth, but had yellowed to the color of old cream, was a painting. Not a large one, roughly so the size of a hardcover book. The frame was plain wood, dark and worn, with a small chip in the lower left corner. Itself showed a winter landscape, a frozen lake, bare birch trees along the shore, grey sky. The brushwork was loose and confident. The paint was thick in places. She could see the texture of it even in the dim kitchen light. It meant nothing to her. She was not someone who knew about paintings. She took a photograph and sent it to her friend Priya, who was doing a graduate degree in art history at York. "Does this mean anything to you?" she typed. Priya's response came back 40 minutes later. "Where did you get that?" "From my grandmother. Ivy, that style. The composition, the way those trees are handled. I'm not saying anything definitive, but I need you to take that to someone who knows what they're doing. Like this week. Can you get to Toronto?" Ivy looked at the painting. Then she looked at her bank account on her phone. 340.17 cents, and rent was due in 3 weeks. She drove to Toronto on a Thursday. The gallery Priya had recommended was on Queen Street West, the kind of place that had no sign on the door, just a frosted glass panel and an intercom. Inside it smelled like climate-controlled air and careful money. The woman at the front desk looked at Ivy's coat, 5 years old, from Winners, and then at the painting she was carrying in a reusable grocery bag from Loblaws, and arranged her face into a professional welcome that did not quite reach her eyes. She said she'd see if Mr. Beaumont was available. He was. Philip Beaumont was 63 years old, with the kind of unhurried certainty that comes from spending decades being right about things other people couldn't see. He came out from the back in a grey linen shirt with the sleeves rolled up, looked at Ivy once with the quick professional assessment of someone used to reading people, and then said, "Let's see it." She set it on the counter. Philip Beaumont went very still. He leaned forward without touching it and looked at it for a long time. Then he reached under the counter for a magnifying glass and looked again. He tilted his head. He straightened. He looked at the back of the frame. He spent what felt like a full minute examining the lower right corner of the canvas with the magnifying glass. He set the glass down. He looked at Ivy. "Where did this come from?" he asked. His voice was completely level, but something had shifted in his expression. She wasn't sure what to call it. It wasn't excitement exactly. It was more like the look of a person who has just understood something they'd been trying to understand for a long time. "My grandmother left it to me," Ivy said. "She said her mother gave it to her. Said she was told it was worthless." Philip Beaumont set the magnifying glass down very carefully on the counter. "Who told her that?" he asked quietly. "I don't know." He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Do you know the name Tom Thompson?" Ivy said she knew the name. Every Canadian knew the name. The group of 7 in Algonquin Park in 1917, whose small oil sketches on wooden panels had become some of the most recognized images in Canadian art. Philip said, "This isn't a Thompson, but it's by someone who painted alongside him. Someone who worked in the same tradition, the same period, possibly in the same locations." He paused. "There are works from this circle that have never been fully catalogued, that were given away or lost or—" Another pause. "Dismissed." He looked at her steadily. "I'd need to run proper authentication. This would take time. I can put you in touch with specialists. There's a woman at the AGO who spent 20 years on this particular period." He took a breath. "But I want to be honest with you. Based on what I'm seeing here, based on the provenance you're describing, if this is what I think it might be, we're not talking about a garage sale find. We're talking about something significant." Ivy said. "How significant?" Philip Beaumont didn't answer right away. He looked at the painting one more time. "Attentited, attributed correctly, potentially in the range of $200,000 to $400,000, he said. "Possibly more, depending on the buyer. There's been renewed international interest in this period. Canadian landscape work from the early 20th century has been moving very strongly at auction." He looked up at her. "But I want to be careful. I don't want to tell you a number and have you walk out of here with wrong expectations." Ivy realized she was gripping the edge of the counter. She released it. "I have wrong expectations right now," she said. "I think anything you tell me is going to be an upgrade." Something in Philip Beaumont's expression shifted, and for a moment it looked almost like— She wasn't sure. Emotion was not quite the right word for it. Recognition? Maybe. The kind of look someone gives when they've been a witness to something they know will matter. "Let me make some calls," he said. Spencer called her that Friday evening. She was eating leftover Thai food on her kitchen floor because her table was covered in the authentication paperwork. Philip's assistant had emailed her, and she hadn't gotten around to clearing it. Her phone buzzed, and she looked at the screen and thought briefly about not answering. She answered. "I wanted to check in," Spencer said, in the tone of a man who was not in the habit of checking in, but had decided to make an exception. "See how you were settling in. It must have been hard. Coming all this way, barely knowing us." Ivy said she was managing fine, thank you. "The house is going on the market next month," Spencer said. "We're keeping most of the good pieces, of course, but the process of sorting through everything Mum collected over the years, you know how of it, is just accumulated clutter." A brief pause. "I did want to ask, the box she left you, the old wooden one, was there anything in it? Mum had a habit of keeping things she should have thrown out years ago." Ivy looked at the painting, which was now leaning against the wall across from her, wrapped in clean cloth, waiting for its appointment with the specialist from the AGO. "Just some old things," she said. "Right," said Spencer. "Right. Well, if there's anything you decide you don't want, you can always drop it off. No need to lug it back to Thunder Bay. I'm in Oakville still, actually," Ivy said. A pause. "Oh, planning to stay?" "For a little while," she said. She hung up and sat on the kitchen floor and ate her pad thai and looked at the painting and thought about her grandmother sitting alone in that house for 17 years, with a painting on the shelf of a wardrobe cabinet that she'd been told was worthless, keeping it anyway because she couldn't let it go. She thought about Eleanor's hands making butter tarts, moving with the unself-conscious ease of a person who has made something so many times it has become part of the body's memory. She thought, "I'm sorry it took so long." The specialist from the AGO was named Dr. Catherine Royce. She was 51 years old, with short grey hair and reading glasses on a chain around her neck, and an expression of focused intelligence that made Ivy feel like she was being read as much as the painting was. Dr. Royce spent 2 hours with the painting. She used a UV light. She used a loupe. She took photographs of the canvas from 6 different angles. She examined the back of the panel with the careful attention of someone reading a map. At one point, she put on cotton gloves and tilted the painting toward the window and simply looked at it for 5 minutes without saying anything. Then she set it down. She looked at Ivy. "Do you know," she said, in the measured tone of someone choosing every word carefully, "how rare it is to find an undocumented work from this circle in private hands?" Ivy said she was beginning to understand. "I've been studying this period for 22 years, Dr. Royce said. I have documented 43 works that were previously unknown or misattributed. This would be the 44th. She paused. "Your grandmother's grandmother likely received this directly from the artist. Given the size, the style, the period, these small panels were often given as gifts or sold informally for almost nothing. They weren't recognized as what they were. Not yet." "And now?" Ivy said. Dr. Royce looked at the painting one more time. "Now," she said, "we know what they are." She removed her glasses and let them hang on their chain. "The authentication process will take 3 to 4 months, she said. There will be technical analysis, paint samples, canvas dating, comparison against documented works. Philip will walk you through the commercial side, but I want you to understand." She looked at Ivy directly. "What you have here is not just financial value. It is part of the documented history of Canadian art. It belongs in the record. Your grandmother kept it. You brought it here." "That matters." Ivy sat with that for a moment. "She said she kept it because she couldn't let go of it," Ivy said. Dr. Royce nodded slowly. "That's often how these things survive." Spencer called again 2 weeks later. This time his voice had a different quality, still smooth, still controlled, but with something underneath it that hadn't been there before. Melissa had apparently done some digging. She'd found Philip Beaumont's gallery website, seen the name Ivy Hartwell in a brief mention in an arts newsletter. Nothing specific, just a note about a private client consultation regarding an early 20th century Canadian landscape work of potential significance. "I heard you went to see someone on Queen Street," Spencer said. Ivy said she had. "About the painting." A pause. "What painting?" "The one in the box," Spencer said. "Don't be coy, Ivy." "There was a painting in the box," Ivy said. "Yes." Silence on the line. "Mum left me the box and everything in it," Ivy said. "Gordon Whitfield has the documentation. If you'd like to speak to him, his number is on the website." Another silence. "We're family," Spencer said. His voice had shifted again. It was the voice of a man trying something new because the first approach hadn't worked. "Whatever Mum's wishes were, I think it's important that we, as a family, consider what's fair. You barely knew her. You were there for 11 days. I was there," Ivy said, "and she asked me to come." She hung up. She sat for a long time in the quiet of the apartment above the Thai restaurant, listening to the sound of the street outside, and thought about Eleanor reading her daughter's letter, and deciding to reach out to a granddaughter she hadn't seen in 17 years, and what it takes to make that decision, and what it means to know that you are running out of time to make things right. She thought, "You knew, didn't you? You knew what was in that box," she thought. "You could have told me." And then she thought, "But you wanted me to find out for myself, because you knew I needed to." The authentication came back in late October. Philip Beaumont called her on a Tuesday afternoon, and she sat down before she picked up the phone, because she'd learned to do that, when she expected news that would move the floor. The painting was confirmed, a work by Franklin Carmichael, one of the original members of the Group of Seven, painted during his sketching trips to northern Ontario in the early 1920s. It had been gifted, the provenance trail eventually confirmed, to a woman in Parry Sound who had been kind to him during a trip when he was caught in a storm. She had kept it. Her daughter had kept it. Eleanor had kept it. No one, along the way, had known what they had. Or maybe they had simply loved it because it was beautiful, and that had been enough. The painting sold at auction in February, a specialized Canadian art sale at Heffel's in Toronto, for $480,000. Philip held Ivy's hand briefly before the auction started, in the slightly formal way of a man who is not given to gestures, but feels the moment calls for one. "Your grandmother would be pleased," he said. Ivy thought about Eleanor at the kitchen table, passing her the rolling pin, saying a little more pressure than you think you need, and then stop before you go too far. She'd say it was about time, Ivy said. She did not speak to Spencer after the sale. She heard from Gordon Whitfield that Spencer had consulted a second lawyer about contesting the will, and that the second lawyer had advised him that he had no case, and that Spencer had apparently used a particular word when he received this news that Whitfield declined to repeat. She heard from a cousin she'd never met, Eleanor's niece's daughter, living in Halifax, who'd found her through the Heffel auction listing and sent her a long email saying she'd always loved Eleanor and was glad someone in the family had stayed with her at the end. Ivy wrote back. She used part of the money to pay off what she owed. She used another part to take a course she'd been putting off for 3 years, in heritage building restoration. She'd always been good with old things, good at seeing what they could be if someone paid attention. She found a small apartment in Oakville, not far from the house on the lakeshore, and she kept the velvet pouch with Eleanor's husband's watch on the shelf, by the window where it caught the morning light. She kept one other thing. Philip had told her she didn't have to sell everything in the box. There had been 2 items wrapped in that yellowed cloth, the painting, and underneath it, a small card, the size of a playing card, with a sketch in pencil on one side, a birch tree rendered in maybe 30 seconds, loose and certain. On the back, in a different hand from Eleanor's. "For whoever ends up with this, may you know what you have." She had it framed. It hung in the kitchen of the Oakville apartment above the table where she made butter tarts on Sunday mornings, still with the filling a little runny in the center. The way Eleanor had taught her, the way her mother had taught Eleanor, the way it was supposed to be passed down. If someone handed you a box and told you it was worthless, would you open it anyway? Eleanor Hartwell kept that painting for decades because she felt something in it that no one else could name for her. She trusted that feeling even when everyone around her didn't. And that quiet stubbornness, the refusal to let go of something just because someone else said it didn't matter, turned out to be the whole story. The things people dismiss are sometimes the things most worth holding on to, and the people who are overlooked. The ones who show up quietly at the end, just in time, sometimes turn out to be the ones who were supposed to be there all along. If this story moved you, please share it with someone who needs to hear it. And if you believe in recognizing things for what they truly are, hit subscribe. There are more stories like this one waiting for you right here on Claim the Drama.